Hi guys, so just to make it abundantly clear, this is not a video where I talk about the 10 worst films I've ever seen in the cinema. I don't really see the point in doing that. This is about my 10 worst experiences in the cinema, whether it be because of the cinema itself or because of general idiocy among the cinema-going population. So yeah, with it being a few days until Christmas, I thought I'd do something different rather than the usual reviews and rankings. This is a video I'm only going to be able to do once because it's literally taken me a whole lifetime to build up the list of anecdotes that I've got for you today. Nothing too crazy has ever happened to me in the cinema. I mean, I've never gone and suddenly everybody started turning into demons and I've had to ride up and down the aisle on a motorbike. Nothing like that. But what I can tell you is that all the stories today are absolutely 100% true. Scout's honour. And I've even got a couple of honourable mentions for you before we get into the main 10. So this will give you a flavour of what to expect. So first of all, there was a time when I went to watch Pet Sematary 4 years ago. It was the 2019 remake, and I was sat on the back row. I always used to sit on the back row when I went to the cinema, and I guess the main reason for that is because it makes it a lot easier to get away with doing sexual things. No, I'm just kidding. I always used to sit on the back row. I don't actually know why. It was just my favoured row to sit on, like it is for a lot of people, I suppose. But that all changed with Pet Sematary, because on this particular occasion, there were loads of people with their phones out on with the lights. Like, you can dim your light on your phone, but not a lot of people do that in the cinema. Maybe they just don't know that you can do it. And there were like at least 3 or 4 people on both sides of me because I was quite central, and they had their phones out for like most of the movie. And honestly, it was like a light show. It was doing my head in. It was just all over the place. The film wasn't very good as well, which didn't help. But when I was walking home from that, I made the decision that I wasn't going to sit on the back row anymore. And I've stuck to that ever since. I kind of sit just before the middle now. So I'm actually closer to the front now than the back. And the theory is that if there are dickheads with lights, I can't see them if they're behind me. And it's kind of panned out for the best. So a very negative experience at the time. I really wasn't in a good mood when I walked home that night, but at least I've been able to reform my cinema going ways because of it, and things are better now. So that's one experience. And the other honourable mention would be the time just last year, actually, when I went to watch Barbarian, and I bought a £5 vanilla milkshake, and the woman said, "Oh, it's not gone through properly, can you do it again?" And I did it again, and of course I got charged twice. And I realised at the time that it had happened because I was a bit suspicious, and I went and checked my banking app when I was right there, and yeah, it had come off twice. And I actually told the woman, I said, "You've charged me twice here. Can I have a refund, please?" And she said no, because it's policy that you have to email this certain email address and then they'll refund you within 5 days or something. And I was like, "Are you serious? You've literally just taken the money right here. Why can't I just have it back right here?" But no. So just dreadful business practice. I mean, I can cope without the £5 for a week or so. That's not the problem. It's the principle of the thing. It just really put me in a bad mood going into the movie. But at least the movie was pretty damn decent. So, you know, I didn't have too bad a night in the end. Right, so those are my 2 honourable mentions. And now that I've been talking about them, I kind of feel like I probably should have put them in the main 10. There's probably some worse ones in the top 10. But yeah, let's get into the main 10. Now, I've not done these like a ranking. I'm not going to have numbers on the pictures or anything like that. I'm just going to go through them mostly in the order that I thought to write them down, although I've deliberately saved the worst one until last. Right, let's find out what the first one is. Quick disclaimer, I'm not 100% certain that Mr. Bean was the movie in question here, because I'm going back a long way with this one. This was like late 90s, I think. But I think it was Mr. Bean, the disaster movie. That's what I'm going for. So it was the middle of the summer holidays, and my dad had given me a few quid to go to the cinema, and I think my brother might have been there as well. And what happened was, you know when a movie starts at the cinema, they put up the name of the film on a black background with the age rating, and it just hangs there for a few seconds, and that's when you know the film's about to start. Well, they put up the title of a completely different film, and then suddenly that other film started, and it was like an animation film. It was like Masher and the Bear or something, but like not that. And we were just like looking around at each other like, what the hell? We were checking our tickets to see if we'd gone in the wrong screening, but there were other people doing the same thing. So it became clear that they'd just put the wrong movie on. And for a while, nothing changed, because I think I mean, there must have been like at least 50 people in this screening. There were a lot of people there, and yet nobody wanted to be the person to go out to reception and tell them to get their arse in gear. So it took a while to sort out. Eventually, the screen went black, and then we went back to the title card of Mr. Bean, and then the proper movie started. But it was just kind of irritating for a while. But at least it wasn't a movie that I was desperate to see. I mean, I've never been a big fan of Mr. Bean or anything, but if it had been like something like Halloween Kills, I mean, you know, I think there would have been like a charge of horror fans towards reception. There would have been like a log jam of people just trying to squeeze past each other, desperate to get to reception. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was a horrible cinema experience, but it for about 10 minutes, it was just bloody irritating, I suppose. So if you've been to the cinema a lot, you'll know that the bunch of seats at the front rarely get used unless it's absolutely heaving. Like, those seats are always the last ones to go. Now, these days, it's not actually that bad sitting at the front, because most of the modern cinema designs, they've left a reasonable gap between the screen and the front row. But it didn't always used to be that way. Like the really old-fashioned cinemas that I grew up with, like in the 80s and 90s, you really didn't want to be at the front. And one time it was for Wayne's World 2 in the middle of the 90s. I think I was about 14 at the time. And this particular occasion, it was exciting for me because my cousin had invited me to go and see this film with him and his friends. Now, they were all like 20, 21, and I was like 14, so I was getting to hang out with the big kids for the evening. It was really exciting. We drove over to this nearby town in two separate cars, but when we got there, because we hadn't booked ahead and because we got there quite late, the only place we could sit where there was room for 6 was the very front row, and it was literally right under the screen. Like, it's like nothing you'll get nowadays. As soon as I sat down, I realised that I was literally the screen. It was like it was in the heavens. I was just like I was like shrinking down into my seat just to kind of crane my neck. Not what you want. It was just absolutely horrible. The following day, I felt like I had whiplash, and it didn't help that the film was absolutely fucking shit as well. It was exciting being out with those guys, sure, just for this one-off occasion, but I came away from that thinking I cannot sit on the front row ever again. Not a problem these days, because with online booking and booking ahead, I can go on an app now, and if the only seats available are in the front, it's quite probable that I will just pick a different viewing on a different night or later on the same night, you know. But back in the day, there wasn't really things like that available. You just had to go and be as early as possible to avoid disappointment, you know. But yeah, this wasn't a good occasion, really wasn't. The 2015 Fantastic Four movie was universally panned, but just as a little aside, I actually thought it was quite good. Now, the screening that I went to, there were only 6 people in. Me, a group of 4 lads, 2 rows in front of me, and there was another loner somewhere across the way. But these 4 lads, they would not shut the hell up for the entire movie. It's like they were emboldened by the fact that there was hardly anybody in, and they just treated it like it was a living room or something. It was just yak, 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 take the piss out of the movie, yak, yak, take the piss out of the movie, yak, yak, laugh at this, laugh at that, check your phone, yak, yak. And I didn't feel like I could say anything because there was just one of me and 4 of them. I mean, if there'd been just 3 of them, I probably would have sorted that shit out, you know, but 4 of them, that's testing even my kung fu skills, you know. So I just felt like I had to leave it, and it just really impacted the movie. It was like, this is really irritating. Why do you 4 people have to exist? You're morons. So yeah, that was definitely really irritating to the extreme, actually. In early 2020, it became really obvious that cinemas were about to close down, so I decided to make one last big effort to go and see a movie because I figured that lockdown was imminent. And the movie I went to see was The Hunt. Not a bad movie, but there were so many annoying protocols in place at the cinema that, looking back, I don't even think it was worth going. For example, you had to wear a mask everywhere in the cinema. So even when I got into the foyer, I was starting to get annoyed because me and masks just didn't work during COVID, because the problem for me is that I've got glasses, so whenever I had a COVID mask on, it instantly made my glasses start to steam up and I couldn't see properly. So I had to sort of make an extra effort to stay out of the public during COVID because of this mask problem that I had. Luckily, I had a job where I was able to work from home. But in general, I tried to avoid being in situations where I would have to wear a mask, But this one time at the cinema, I obviously had to have it, and it was just really irritating. I was constantly like fiddling with my glasses and stuff. And then in the queue, there was this guy coming around making us all download this app, which meant that if there was an outbreak in the cinema that night, they could trace you. So I had to waste time doing that. And then I realised that they weren't selling drinks and stuff, I think. One thing that definitely happened is that they closed the little cafe area. So whenever I go to the cinema, I always get there like 15, 20 minutes early and sit in a little cafe type area with a milkshake. It just gives me a chance to get my breath back after walking to the cinema. And, it's a nice little sit down for a little bit just before I go in and watch the movie. Well, this area was now closed, so I couldn't even have that pleasure. And then when I went into the actual seats, I was told that I had to keep the mask on, but that was never realistic because of the glasses problem. So I sort of lowered my mask down to my nose level, and I was sort of worried somebody would come in and complain at me, but that never happened. But even going to the toilet was irritating because the main toilets were closed. So you had to go out this side door, and there were like arrows pointing you around the back of the building towards these temporary porta cabins that they'd put on, which were really dirty. And the whole experience was just like, it was a faff. Everything about the whole thing was just a faff, and it was like, it wasn't even worth it. Even if the world now dies because of COVID, this last cinema experience just not worth the time and effort. This story goes back to this idea of there being no booking apps back in the day. Now, you could turn up at the cinema in person and buy tickets, but my dad, who used to take me to the cinema when I was a teenager, he would never do something like that. Plus, we lived in a really small town, and the only cinema we had access to was another town over. So the idea that my dad was going to go to a different town to get tickets, come back, and then we would go and see the movie, he was never going to do that. And he was also the sort of person who would only turn up at the cinema bang on time, or even just slightly after time, whereas I'm the kind of person who likes to get there really early, just in case something goes wrong, but that's just the way my dad was. Now, to be fair, for most of his life, he probably got away with this, but Jurassic Park was a completely different beast. Like, if you're not old enough to remember when the first Jurassic Park movie came out, you will not be able to appreciate just how much of a phenomenon it was. I mean, it was bonkers. Like, that year that the film came out, there was nothing else but Jurassic Park. It was the big thing. And the initial run that Jurassic Park went on at the cinema, it was huge. It was just week after week. It was the top film. Everybody was going to see it. Now, me and my dad, we went to see it, but when we got there, the queue was out the door and in the street. And it was one of those old school cinemas that was still around in the 90s. There wasn't much room in the foyer, so the queues could go out into the street sometimes for popular movies. We were queuing up for Jurassic Park, and the queue was just sort of shuffling gradually indoors and up the stairs. But I'd say we got about halfway to the ticket booth, and then it got passed down the line that there were no more tickets left. It was completely sold out. So we had to drive all the way back to our hometown, having not seen the movie. Now, the following week we went back to try again, but my dad did not learn his lesson. We still went at exactly the same time and just expected it to all be hunky-dory. And once again, we got embroiled in a really long queue that stretched out into the street. This time, we did get a lot closer to the ticket booth. We actually got up the stairs this time and round the corner, and I think we were like 5 or 6 families away from the ticket booth. And then suddenly the shutter thing closed and like, no more tickets, no more. And we were like, oh, God's sake. So we had to go back out, drive home again. This was twice we'd been and not seen the damn movie. So then the following week, we tried for a third time. Jurassic Park was still very much really big in the cinemas, and my dad did not learn his lesson again. We still just turned up at exactly the same time pretty much and just expected it to be fine. And once again, we got embroiled in a really long queue. And I remember this time when we got to like just a few people from the ticket box, I remember thinking, please, 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 just let a few more people in, please. And my dad, to be fair, he made a cracking joke at this point. He said something like, he said, "You watch, we'll get right up to the counter and then the shutters will come down on our fingers." It'd be like, ah! But no, luckily we got there, and I remember when he started processing our tickets, I remember thinking, yes, we've actually got in to see Jurassic Park. But this was like the third time we tried. It was just absolutely bonkers, but that just wouldn't happen nowadays. This is a very similar story to the one we've just had, actually. So in 97, 98, I went to watch Titanic with a group of friends. Now, I was in A-level year at this point. It was very close to the end of my school life. And we'd arranged this trip for Saturday night. There was a bunch of us, and it was really exciting, not just because I was out with some friends, but also I was really looking forward to the movie. You know, I really wanted to see Titanic. It was going to be this epic 3-hour film, friends with me, what's not to love? But similar to Jurassic Park, we got there. There weren't any queues when we got to the cinema. Times were already changing in the cinema. Like Jurassic Park, there were queues out the door and all this. But by the time Titanic came out, I feel like the cinema world was changing a bit in terms of people's habits, because I think people were getting more canny in terms of booking their tickets and stuff. My memory is that we all went straight to the ticket office with no queue quite early. The film hadn't started by this point, and yet we were told that it was all sold out and stuff. It was like it was just times were changing basically with queues, but it was still really annoying. We'd made this effort to meet up and go down there. Now, unlike with the Jurassic Park experience, we didn't just leave and come back another time. We didn't even know if we'd be able to make it back another time, all of us together like this. So we decided to watch another movie instead, and the only other movie that was starting pretty soon was this rugby comedy called Up and Under. So we went to watch that, and I guess some people like comedies. Some of my friends like comedies, and they had an all right time with it, but I personally don't. And I certainly don't like rugby. I just think it's an absolutely crap sport, in all honesty. So I sat there like this, just with a grump on the entire time. This film was only half the runtime of Titanic as well. It was a much shorter experience. And the whole time, I was just thinking that through the wall nearby, there were a bunch of people getting to watch Titanic, this masterpiece of a film, won load of Oscars. And here I am watching this crappy little low-budget British comedy. I mean, who even remembers Up and Under? Is there anybody watching this video who's ever seen it? It had Neil Morrissey in it, who was a thing at the time. I think it might have had Samantha Janus in it at the time. Come on. When I got married, we had our honeymoon in Australia, and it just so happens that at the time, the third Twilight movie, Twilight Eclipse, was showing in cinemas. And my wife was a bit of a Twilight obsessive. She had the books, she loved the films, you know, Twilight. And I didn't mind this. I was prepared to put up with her Twilight hobby. I mean, relationships are about give and take, right? You tolerate your other half's bad habits, and you just learn to live with them. And I was quite prepared to live with the fact that my wife was into this shit. Quite happy. But in the middle of our honeymoon, she persuaded me to go and watch the third Twilight film, and me being, you know, all happy about getting married, I kind of thought, yeah, go on, I'll go and watch Twilight Eclipse with you. I'd only seen the first one at this point, so I was coming into this third film knowing that the plot would go right over my head, because I hadn't even seen the second film, and I didn't even properly remember the first one, so I knew I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I was prepared to sort of, you know, put myself through it for her. But I thought to myself, you know what, I'm only going to make this situation tolerable by just making sure that I at least get lots of nice snacks and things that I can enjoy while the film's happening. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to get the biggest hot dog on the menu, I'm going to get coffee, I'm going to get this and that, and I will just savour all the best culinary delights that the cinema has to offer while this garbage film's playing out, and at least we'll get through this, you know. But no, this cinema in Hobart had different ideas for me. The hot dog machine was broken, the coffee machine was broken, the only food they were selling was crisps, and you could get soft drinks, I think, but this stuff is, I'm just not into that stuff, you know. So I was sat there watching this movie. Not only have I got to put up with this awful film, but I can't even have the food and drink that I want. And it just led to a really annoying 2 hours, easily the worst part of the honeymoon. And I mean, I was sat there in the end, like Googling divorce lawyers on the sly, just without my wife seeing in the middle of the film, but not good times. This is another one where my dad was basically being a dick, and it cost us big time. So Crimson Tide is a submarine movie. It's kind of a slow-moving political thriller. From what I can remember, I haven't seen it since the 90s. I didn't even want to see it when it came out. It was more my dad's choice, but I just went along with it. Now, the film had a 15 certificate, and this wasn't a problem because I was 15. I was absolutely the right age to watch this movie. No problems there. And even if I hadn't been, the cinema wasn't going to ask my age or check. It just wasn't a done thing for the most part. And I was a kid who looked my age. You know, I absolutely looked 15. When we were travelling to the cinema, we had absolutely no worries that this was going to be an issue. I had a 15-year-old face comfortably. So we got into the ticket queue, not anticipating any problems. But then we got to the ticket booth. And my dad, in his infinite wisdom, and I don't to this day understand what he was doing, he asked for one adult ticket and one under 15 ticket. And this immediately put the booth guy into a really difficult situation. It was just this young guy. He didn't give a crap what age I was. I could have been 11. He probably would just let me walk in. But because we had just outright implicated ourselves and said that I was an under 15, he was now in the position where he had to sort of turn us away, because otherwise it would just look silly in front of other people behind us, and maybe his boss was floating around somewhere, I don't know. So he had to literally say, he can't actually come in if he's an under 15. It's a 15 film. And my dad was like, oh, right, okay, well, we'll be on our way then. And so we just left like a couple of absolute tits. And I just remember thinking, what did he even do that for? I mean, I guess he'd forgotten that I'd turned 15, because I'd only been 15 for a few weeks, I think. Or I guess maybe he was thinking that he could save a couple of quid if he bought a cheaper ticket. But the thing is, there wasn't even such a thing as an under 15 ticket. He just made that up. There was no ticket that was actually that. So it was just really annoying. The following week, we went back to watch the film again. This time we got in. Now, I was sort of worried that the same guy would be in the booth. I had a story prepared for this, and so did my dad. We were just going to say that I'd had my birthday in the week leading up, but we didn't need to bother with that. It was a different person. But we got in and watched this movie, and it was garbage. I mean, I just cannot stand Crimson Tide. I cannot remember anything about this movie other than people just talking on a submarine, and Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington in particular just banging on about Portuguese horses. Those fucking horses. They just kept bringing them up throughout the movie. I don't remember anything happening during the movie. Maybe if I watched it now as a much older person, I might get some enjoyment out of it that I didn't at the time. But by and large, I just don't want to. I just don't even want to see if the movie changes for me. I just remember it being boring as hell. And coupled with the fact that we had this experience the week before where we couldn't even get in, I just don't look back on Crimson Tide with any pleasure. This one involves my son, my oldest son. So there was a point when he was about 5 or 6 that he started watching Ghostbusters films at home, and he was really into them. He was really enjoying them. So when they brought the new one out, and by new one, I mean the one with the women that came out around about 2016, something like that, I said I would take him to see that at the cinema. And the reason why I could is because the film is a 12A, which means that as long as there's an adult there, then the child can be any age, right? So we went to watch this film, or at least we attempted to watch this film, but the first scene, the prologue, it's like a big battle scene with some ghosts in this building, and there were loads of like flashing lights and ghosts, and it was quite intimidating and stuff, and my son was scared shitless. And he kept saying to me straight away, like, oh, I don't like this, I want to go. And I had no choice, really, because I thought, well, he's really stressed about this, so I'm going to have to take him out. So I took him out of the cinema and we went home. And I wasn't upset with him because it's not his fault. You know, probably it was my fault for not predicting that this would happen. But the thing is, when he'd been watching Ghostbusters at home, he'd been absolutely fine because it's the living room and he's in the comfortable environment. He was just enjoying it, not scared a jot. But being in the cinema with the darkness and the big screen, and it's a different atmosphere, I guess it just feels different for a child. Plus, another thing I hadn't anticipated is that I think the more modern Ghostbusters films, they're just filmed in a slightly different way that makes them more intimidating, kind of. When it comes to the action scenes especially, they're a bit more louder and boomer bang bang. Whereas those old classics with Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray, they're a bit more child-friendly, maybe. It's just not by much, but just a little bit, a significant bit. So, yeah, that was a bad call on my behalf, I think, taking him to watch that. But I still look back on it as being kind of irritating because it cost like 25 quid or something to pay for the tickets, pay for all these drink and food and stuff, and then we saw like 5 minutes and then we were off home again, and it's like, what a waste of money. But sometimes it happens. I've deliberately left this one until last because it's the most irritating cinema experience of all. So I went to watch St. Maud 2019, 2020, something like that. I don't remember being that knowledgeable about the film going in. I'm not even sure I'd seen a trailer, to be honest, but I did go and see it. But there were these 3 guys who came in, and they were foreigners. I don't even know what nationality. Now, I'm not beating up on foreigners with this story. I would say most of the irritating people I've ever come across in cinemas have been British people. It just so happens in this particular story, the culprits were foreigners. And there were 3 of them, and they just yacked from the start of the film. And this went on for a while, and it was quite a packed cinema audience, this. So it was really uncomfortable and awkward and embarrassing. They were really loud, and people were trying to say something to them and they were just getting ignored, and this one woman was getting really irate. The atmosphere was becoming really toxic, and these 3 guys were just making out like they couldn't even speak English, like they couldn't even respond to any of these criticisms because they didn't understand the language. So it was bad, like for like a short while, and I couldn't even watch the movie because of this drama that was playing out. And then after 15 minutes, the 3 of them just got up and left. And I don't even know what they were doing there in the first place. It's like they thought they'd arrived at a cafe or something, and because they just seemed to have no interest in the movie. It's not like they were watching the movie and then saying things that were like comments on what was going on. It was like they were just having a chat, an internal chat, and not even focusing on the screen. It was just really weird. It's like, what are you doing there? But they did leave, and for a second I thought everybody was going to have a round of applause that they finally gone. It was that kind of atmosphere by the time they went. But I'd say 15 minutes of the movie had gone by this point. But the thing is, it ruined the film because St. Maud, the early stages of that film, it's about getting to know the character. She does a lot of monologues early on in that. And because I'd missed a lot of that, I just wasn't in the right place to enjoy the rest of the story. And these were the really early days of this YouTube channel, actually. So I did a review on the film, but I was kind of mixed. I gave it like 3 out of 5. I think I did mention the experience with the 3 guys in the review, but I only gave it 3 out of 5. My mind had totally been polluted by what had happened. And then later, some point down the line, I watched the movie again and thought to myself, Jesus, this movie's amazing. Why did I only give it 3 out of 5? Well, it probably because of what happened in the cinema. So I changed my score to 4.5 out of 5. I actually went on the video and put a comment in saying, this is me commenting like a year later. I'm changing my score. Ignore what was in the video. 4.5 out of 5 now. Yeah, I think St. Maud is a brilliant film. And I would, if I did a top 100 horror films tomorrow, I imagine that film might get in that, I think. So there we are. So yeah, we've come to the end. That was my 10 most irritating cinema experiences, or 12, I guess, if you count the honourable mentions. Do let me know in the comments some of your most irritating experiences of the cinema. I'd be fascinated to read some stories, some anecdotes, so throw them in there and I'll take a look at them. But aside from that, I'll say goodbye. This is probably going to be my last video before Christmas, maybe, I'm not sure yet. If it is, I wish you all a very, very happy Christmas. I hope you get the Blu-rays that you're hoping for, and I will speak to you all again soon. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.